A courthouse, a pair of clippers, a bald veteran left trembling, until the judge walked in, and everything changed. The morning air in downtown Little Rock carried that thick, sticky weight only the South knows. It clung to the skin, pressed down on shoulders, made folks just a bit more tired than usual. But Danielle Hayes walked through it like she was back in uniform, steady, head up, not looking for trouble, just doing what needed to be done. She had her summons folded neatly in one hand, her veteran ID clipped to the front of her plain canvas bag, and a water bottle sweating against her side. Her hair, thick with shoulder-length locks, was pulled back in a clean ponytail. No makeup, no jewelry, just her and her pride. It wasn't her first time doing jury duty. She'd served back when she lived in Sacramento, even in San Antonio. Never had an issue. Show up, do your part, head home. But today was different. As she approached the security line at the Pulaski County Courthouse, she nodded politely at the older white man in front of her. He didn't nod back. Danielle stepped through the metal detector, and that's when she saw him. Bailiff Curtis Randall, square jaw, gray buzz cut, broad shoulders like he still hit the gym out of habit. The type who stood just a little too tall, looked a little too long. He scanned her up and down. "You here for something?" he asked, already suspicious. Danielle held up the summons with a calm smile. "Yes, sir. Jury duty, 9 a.m. He didn't take the paper, just looked past it, directly at her hair. "Ma'am, there's a dress code. This is a courtroom, not a street corner." Danielle blinked, caught off guard. "Excuse me?" "Hair needs to be neat and professional," he said, motioning to the laminated rules on the wall. "Dreadlocks are not appropriate in a courtroom setting. We can't have distractions." "First of all," she said, keeping her voice level, "these are locks, and I've served this country in uniform with this same hair on my head. I'm here to do my civic duty, not to cause trouble." Randall crossed his arms, unmoved. "You can either fix it or step out of line. I'm not letting you into that courtroom like this." Danielle stood still. The hallway around her buzzed with low conversation, footsteps, echoing coughs. But right here, between her and this man, it was quiet, tense. "I don't carry a brush or clippers, and I shouldn't have to," she replied. A young black woman sitting behind the security desk looked up, caught Danielle's eye, and quickly looked away. Randall leaned in, voice low but sharp. "Then you can consider this refusal to comply, and I'll have to report it. Jury duty or not, contempt of court is a real thing." She wanted to say something. She had a dozen responses forming in her mind, but the years in the army had taught her when to fight and when to survive. "Can I speak to someone else?" she asked. "I am someone else," he snapped. "I'm the one who decides who steps into that courtroom. You want to go in? Then fix your appearance." Danielle's heart thumped against her ribs, not with fear, with rage. The slow, choking kind. The kind you can't act on unless you want to end up in handcuffs for saying the wrong thing. She took a breath, held it, let it out through her nose. "Let me make a call," she said, trying to buy time. "No calls allowed past the checkpoint," he said. "If you leave, you're forfeiting your duty. If you stay, you'll follow protocol." There was nothing in the courthouse handbook that said anything about hair, but it didn't matter. Randall wasn't quoting rules. He was flexing power. But something in his smug posture told Danielle this wasn't over. She didn't know how, but deep down, she knew this man was going to regret this. Danielle was led into a small back room just past security. It was barely larger than a janitor's closet. No windows, just cinder block walls and the soft hum of a single overhead light. The room smelled like dust and disinfectant. She wasn't under arrest, not officially, but it didn't feel like she had much of a choice. Curtis Randall stood in the doorway, arms folded. "I'm giving you an option here," he said, with the same patronizing tone a teacher might use with a misbehaving student. "We can get you squared away and in that courtroom in 15 minutes, but only if you cooperate." Danielle sat on the hard plastic chair in the corner. "You still haven't explained how my hair is a problem." "It's not personal, Miss Hayes. It's about decorum." She raised her eyes to him. "Is that right?" He shrugged, like it wasn't even worth arguing over. Then he reached into a drawer and pulled out a pair of electric clippers. They buzzed loudly as he flipped them on, testing them like a mechanic would a power tool. Danielle stared at the clippers, her stomach turned. "You want me to let you cut my hair," she said slowly, "because you've decided it's unprofessional." "I didn't decide anything," he said. The court has standards. You can't come in with a hairstyle that calls attention to yourself. It's disruptive. She leaned forward, eyes locked on him. But if a white woman came in with a messy bun, she'd walk right through. He didn't respond. Danielle let the silence speak for itself. I did 2 tours in Iraq. I've been through heat, sandstorms, mortar fire, and men who called me worse than what you're thinking right now, she said, her voice firm but calm. And not one of them, not one, ever tried to take this from me. Are you going to comply, or am I writing this up? She looked at the closed door behind him. She thought about walking out, letting this whole place burn in the shame it deserved. But something inside her, maybe pride, maybe anger, wouldn't let her back down. I'll remember this, she said, standing up. You can remember whatever you want, he said. Sit down. Danielle lowered herself back into the chair. Her hands rested in her lap. Her fingers trembled, but she held them still. I want you to know, she said, looking him straight in the eyes. This isn't compliance. This is survival. Randall didn't flinch. He stepped forward. The buzzing got louder as he brought the clippers to her head. Each pass through her locks was deliberate, detached, like he was mowing a lawn. Thick strands fell to the tile floor like pieces of her dignity. Danielle kept her jaw clenched, her eyes fixed on a spot on the wall. 1, 2, 3 minutes. She felt the air on her scalp, the coolness, the violation. By the time he finished, the floor was covered in her hair. He handed her a paper towel like it was some kind of prize. You're good to go, he said, wiping the clippers on a rag and walking out without another word. Danielle stood up slowly. She didn't look at herself in the mirror. She didn't need to. She already knew what she'd see. A hollow ache sat in her chest, but her spine stayed straight. She walked back into the hallway. The security guard behind the desk, the same young black woman from earlier, averted her gaze again. Danielle said nothing, just handed over her bag to be rescanned and waited. They sent her to courtroom 2A on the 3rd floor. She stepped inside, now bald, the air cooler against her scalp. The room was almost empty. A few early jurors, a clerk, one other bailiff, an older woman named Bethany, who gave her a polite smile, then moved on with her duties. Danielle took her seat in the gallery, her fingers twitching in her lap. She didn't know how long she'd sit there before someone came in to start roll call, but she did know one thing. If today was about teaching her a lesson, Curtis Randall had picked the wrong student, because some lessons echo louder than the moment they're given, and his was coming. He just didn't know it yet. The courtroom was quiet, still early. A few people scattered on benches, scrolling their phones, whispering to one another. Nobody paid attention to Danielle, not yet. She sat in the back, hands clasped tight, her nails digging into her palms. Her head felt bare, too exposed, like every breath of air reminded her of what had just happened. She told herself to stay calm. She had every right to be there. She didn't need to explain anything to anyone, but she could feel the heat rising up her neck. Not from shame, from fury, from the quiet, simmering type of anger that sits beneath the surface and waits for the right moment. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. She tried to focus on her breathing, just like her old sergeant used to say when the nerves kicked in before a mission. Deep inhale, slow exhale, over and over. A woman 2 rows ahead turned around briefly, her eyes locking on Danielle's shaved head. She stared a second too long, then turned back around. Danielle looked down. Across the courtroom, the side door creaked open. Curtis Randall stepped in, now out of uniform, dressed in a gray button-up, coffee in hand, pretending like he hadn't just stripped a woman of her dignity 30 minutes earlier. He scanned the room, spotted her, and for the briefest second, their eyes met again. He looked away. Danielle wanted to stand up, to say something, call him out in front of the dozen or so people already waiting for the judge, but she didn't. Not yet, because that's not how she operated. She didn't need to throw fists to fight. She didn't need to raise her voice to be heard. Not 5 minutes later, a clerk stepped in. We're just waiting on the judge, folks, she said. She's en route. Got caught behind an accident on I-30. A few jurors nodded. Curtis Randall didn't speak. He stood near the bench like nothing unusual had happened, like he hadn't made a decision that morning that could change everything. Danielle's mind drifted to Iraq, to the heat, the sand, the way everything smelled of dust and metal, to Monica Traylor. It had been 12 years since they served together. Danielle could still remember Monica's laugh, low, dry, always coming from somewhere behind her when the mess tent food was extra bad. Monica had been the kind of soldier who knew when to joke and when to get serious. No nonsense when it counted. The two of them had once shared a foxhole for 9 straight hours while mortar shells rained overhead. They didn't talk much back then, just kept their heads down and prayed together. They lost touch after discharge. Different cities, different paths. Danielle had heard Monica made it into law. Had no idea she'd climbed that high. Judges weren't exactly common among her old unit. She hadn't planned on seeing her today. Certainly not like this. Danielle reached up, touched her scalp again. It still felt unreal. Just then, the back doors of the courtroom opened. The clerk straightened her papers. Curtis stood up taller, and in walked Judge Monica Traylor. All rise. Danielle stood with the rest, but her heart stopped. There she was, in the black robe. Natural curls full and proud, poised, calm, confident. She moved to the bench like she'd been doing it her whole life. Danielle swallowed hard. This woman didn't just sit on the bench, she owned it. Curtis Randall stood like a statue. His face froze, eyes wide. Not from recognition, but from confusion. You could see it. The twitch in his brow, the slight step backward. His brain working double time trying to place her face. Monica sat down, adjusted the mic, and glanced toward the juror box. Then the gallery. Then she saw Danielle, and everything in her expression shifted. Recognition hit like a wave. Her mouth parted slightly, her eyes locked in. She looked at Danielle's shaved head, her trembling hands, then back up at Randall. Her entire body stiffened. Danielle saw it. So did a few others. But Monica didn't speak, not yet. She cleared her throat. We'll begin with a few procedural matters. Juror selection will start in 20 minutes. Then she tapped her gavel, a light, deliberate tap. Danielle sat back down, but her pulse was racing. Something had just shifted in that courtroom, and everyone, especially Curtis Randall, was about to feel it. Judge Monica Traylor sat upright, eyes skimming her docket, lips tight. The room carried that stiff, slow-moving tension only courthouses know. Nothing loud, nothing obvious. But underneath it all, something had cracked. Danielle stayed quiet in the gallery, her palms pressed into her thighs, her legs tense, her scalp, freshly shaved, itched with every heartbeat. She didn't flinch. She watched Monica carefully, every small move, every glance. Randall stood near the wall, trying to look busy, but his posture had changed. Gone was the smugness from earlier. Now he was still, trying not to be noticed, trying not to make eye contact. Monica shuffled papers for a few more seconds. Then finally she looked up. Her eyes met Danielle's again, and this time she spoke. Before we proceed, she said, her voice steady, I need to address something. The clerk glanced up from her laptop. A few jurors exchanged confused looks. I noticed a familiar face in the gallery today, Monica continued. Sergeant Danielle Hayes, retired, a fellow soldier I had the honor of serving with overseas. Heads turned. Danielle didn't move. She served with distinction, 2 deployments, medals for bravery, and she's one of the reasons I made it back home in one piece. Monica paused, then added, We haven't spoken in years, but I know her, and I know her strength. You could hear the breath catch in someone's throat. Curtis Randall shifted slightly on his feet. Sweat gathered near his collar. Monica let the silence linger, just long enough. And yet, she said, her eyes narrowing slightly, when I saw her this morning, something was wrong. I knew it instantly. The room was stone quiet now. I've known Danielle for over a decade, Monica said, her voice rising just a touch. And never, not once, have I seen her without her locks. It's not just a style. It's part of her identity, her history, her dignity. She turned toward Randall. Mr. Randall, would you please approach the bench? He hesitated but walked forward slowly, his shoes clicking against the tile like each step cost him. He stopped in front of her, tried to stand tall. Monica didn't blink. I understand there was an incident at security this morning. Randall cleared his throat. Judge, I was following procedure. We've had complaints about distractions in the courtroom. I asked her to make an adjustment. You asked her to shave her head, Monica cut in. Randall froze. You took clippers to a black woman's head. A veteran. A juror. And you did it in the name of decorum? She didn't shout, didn't need to. Her words had weight, the kind that didn't just land, they sunk in. Judge, I didn't mean to offend anyone. Let me be clear, she said, eyes locked on his. You didn't just offend someone. You humiliated her. You tried to erase who she was before she even sat down. Randall's face went pale. I was following what I thought were the rules. There is no rule in this courthouse or any court under federal jurisdiction that bans locks, braids, or any other natural hairstyle. There is, however, a rule about discrimination. Danielle looked down at her lap, her chest tight. Not with sadness, with release, with something that felt dangerously close to vindication. I want you to step outside, Monica said to Randall. You will not return to this courtroom until further notice. Randall didn't argue, didn't speak. He turned and walked out, slower than he came in. And for the first time that day, he looked smaller than the job he wore on his chest. Monica turned back to the room. I apologize to every person here, and especially to Sergeant Hayes. What happened today should never happen to anyone. Not in this building, not anywhere. She looked at Danielle again, and this time she smiled. Just a little, just enough. But now that the mask had been torn off, Danielle knew this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every person who'd ever been told to shrink to fit. And Monica wasn't done yet. After Randall was escorted out, the courtroom didn't quite return to normal. People shifted in their seats, whispering quietly, unsure what to do next. The room held a thick, uncertain silence, like everyone was trying to absorb what they had just witnessed. Judge Traylor didn't speak for a moment. She sat there, her fingers laced in front of her, looking out over the gallery. Then she did something unexpected. She stood, not like a judge reading a verdict, not with ceremony. She just stood up and stepped down from the bench, slowly making her way toward the front row of the gallery. People watched as she walked across the courtroom and stopped in front of Danielle. Permission to speak, off the record? Monica asked gently. Danielle nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Monica took a seat beside her, both women now eye level with the rest of the room. They sat like equals, no bench, no robe, just two women who had seen the same dust, heard the same explosions, and walked the same ground. I knew it was you the second I saw you, Monica said, her voice lower now, private. Even without the hair, that walk, you never lost it. Danielle gave a short laugh through her nose. Didn't know I still had it. Oh, you do, Monica said, still calm, still steel in the spine. They sat in a pause. Danielle finally asked, How long have you been back in Arkansas? Almost 4 years. Took the judgeship last summer. I was in Baltimore before that, working civil rights cases. Felt like I needed to bring that work home. Danielle nodded, eyes fixed on the empty space in front of her. I didn't expect this. I just showed up for jury duty. I was trying to do my part. Monica leaned forward, her hands resting on her knees. You did more than your part today. Danielle finally turned to look her in the eyes. He made me feel small. Monica didn't flinch. But you stood taller than him the entire time. Danielle blinked hard. She wasn't someone who cried easily. The Army had hardened that part of her. But something in Monica's voice chipped at the dam she'd built. Do you remember Camp Victory? Monica asked, switching gears. That night our convoy got stalled outside the perimeter? Danielle cracked a smile. You mean the night we sat in the truck bed eating canned peaches and waiting for the radio to work? Yeah, Monica said, laughing softly. That night. You kept everyone calm, even after that second explosion. You said, don't flinch. That's how they know they've got you. I never forgot that. Danielle chuckled, then shook her head. I was terrified. We all were, Monica said. But you were the one who kept us together. You think I'd forget that? The moment hung in the air. It wasn't about peaches, or explosions, or even Randall anymore. It was about the bond. The kind built not on politics or position, but on survival, on loyalty, on knowing someone had your back when it really counted. Monica finally stood. I'll be filing an internal complaint against Randall, but I'm also calling the Judicial Conduct Board. What happened today will be documented. Danielle stood with her. Thank you, she said, quiet but certain. Monica nodded, and for a second it was like they were both back in uniform. Different ranks, different roles, but still on the same side. But Monica wasn't finished. She was just getting started. Because exposing one man's hate wasn't enough. The system that let it happen needed to feel the heat, too. By the time the court clerk called for a brief recess, word had already started to ripple through the courthouse. You could see it in the way a few other bailiffs avoided eye contact when Monica walked past, in the quiet nods from staff who suddenly found themselves very busy in other rooms. Everyone had heard something. Monica didn't waste time. She returned to chambers, pulled up the courthouse HR portal, and filed the formal complaint herself, not just a quick write-up. She detailed the incident minute by minute. She named names, attached footage from the courtroom's security feed, footage showing Danielle's shaved head, Randall's approach to the bench, and Monica's own public reprimand. But she didn't stop there. She picked up the phone and called the Office of Judicial Conduct, then the local press liaison, then her own administrative judge. She wasn't afraid of what might come next. She knew the backlash was likely, but staying silent? That wasn't an option. By the time she returned to the bench, things had shifted. The gallery was more full now. Some people came back from break looking nervous, others curious, and a few sat straight-backed, eyes wide, like they were watching something rare, justice in real time. Danielle was still seated quietly in the back row. She didn't need to say anything. Her presence said enough. Monica cleared her throat. I want to speak to all of you, jurors, staff, officers of the court, for just a moment before we resume, she said. The room settled. There are moments in this job where procedure must pause for principle, where we stop reading lines from a script and start speaking from our humanity. She looked across the room. This morning, a woman walked into this building ready to serve. She brought with her a record of honor, military service, and quiet dignity. And she was met with humiliation, not by accident, not through misunderstanding, but through the misuse of authority, silence. You may think that's someone else's problem. You may think that's just one bad actor, but I want to be very clear. The systems we work within are shaped by what we tolerate, and what we tolerate becomes what we are. A juror in the third row looked down at her lap, fidgeting with her bracelet. This courthouse doesn't belong to any one group, not to men in uniforms, or judges in robes, or clerks behind glass. It belongs to every person who steps foot inside it seeking justice, and it damn sure belongs to Danielle Hayes. Danielle looked up, her mouth tight, holding back emotion. You don't need a gavel to make change, Monica continued. Sometimes all it takes is someone refusing to walk away quietly. A beat of silence. And before we begin today's case, let me make one thing very clear to everyone listening. Whether you're in this room or hearing about it down the hall or reading about it tomorrow. If you think authority gives you permission to erase someone's identity, you don't belong in this building. You're not protecting the law, you're poisoning it. A few heads nodded, subtle but real. Monica sat back in her chair. Now, let's proceed. The clerk began calling jurors for voir dire. Danielle didn't move from her seat, but she didn't need to. Everyone saw her now, for who she was, for what she'd endured, and for what she'd stood through, silently, firmly. Back in the hall, Curtis Randall sat in the security office, staring down at a form he was being forced to sign. Temporary administrative leave pending investigation. His face was blank. He'd seen himself as a gatekeeper, but today the gate slammed shut on him. But even as he walked out, it wasn't about Randall anymore. It was about who would step up next. Because silence didn't protect anybody, and it never had. Danielle didn't speak to the media. She didn't post about it. She didn't need a trending hashtag to make her feel seen. What mattered had already happened. In that courtroom, in front of strangers, in front of Judge Traylor. She finished her jury duty. Every morning that week, she walked back into the courthouse, head high, bald head uncovered, unapologetic. Nobody dared stop her. Not anymore. The young security clerk, the same one who looked away when it all began, offered her a quiet good morning on day 2. By day 4, they shared a short nod. No big moment, no speech, just small human respect. And sometimes that's enough to start something better. Word about Randall spread fast. His leave became permanent by the following month. An investigation confirmed that what he did wasn't just inappropriate, it was targeted. Bias, weaponized under the mask of order. He lost more than his job. His name now carried weight, but not the kind he'd wanted. Monica Traylor faced pushback, of course. Judges always do when they make waves. There were calls, emails, whispers about overstepping, about getting too personal. But she didn't flinch. She issued a formal recommendation to revise the courthouse's conduct guidelines, specifically to ban discrimination against natural hairstyles and require racial sensitivity training for all courtroom staff. It passed, unanimously. Danielle never asked for recognition, but a month later she received a letter, handwritten, signed by Judge Traylor herself. Some fights are loud, some are quiet. Yours was quiet, but it echoed all the way to the bench. Thank you for standing anyway. She kept that letter tucked in the front of her bookshelf, right next to her folded flag and discharge papers. A few months later, Danielle was asked to speak at a veterans panel at a community college in Conway. She almost said no, but something pulled her there. She stood in front of a crowd of mostly young people, some just starting out, some fresh out of the military, a few in baggy hoodies and sneakers. And she told them what happened. She didn't cry. She told the truth. And at the end, a young woman with short braids raised her hand and said, "What made you stay? After he cut your hair?" Danielle paused. Then she said, "Because walking away doesn't always keep you whole. Sometimes, standing still, quiet, bald, angry, makes them look at themselves. And that's when the real change starts." A hush fell over the room. After the panel, one of the professors walked up to her and said, "You ever thought about teaching?" Danielle just smiled. The thing is, most stories like this, they don't make headlines. They don't get justice in 10 minutes. They fade behind bigger news, louder names, but they matter because they're real. They happen in courthouses and classrooms, in break rooms and barbershops, every single day. And they remind us, bias doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it shows up with clippers in hand, pretending to follow rules. But silence doesn't keep you safe. It just keeps you invisible. Danielle didn't raise her voice. She didn't throw a fit. She just showed up, stood her ground, and let the truth speak through her pain. And Monica? She did what more people in power need to do. She didn't just see what was wrong. She said it, out loud, publicly. That matters. Because when one person speaks up, it gives the next person permission to do the same. If you've ever been made to feel small for just being yourself, don't forget, your story matters, your presence matters, and your silence is not the price of peace. Speak up, even if your voice shakes, even if no one's looking, especially then, because sometimes all it takes to shift the whole room is one person refusing to shrink. And if you know someone like Danielle, or someone who's been Danielle, share this story with them. Let them know they're not alone. And if you've ever had power, whether in a classroom, a courtroom, or a company, use it right. Use it to lift, not to crush. Because what you tolerate becomes what you are.